In 1969, Dr. Donald Goben gathered a group of study participants and asked them to each recall the object he'd shown them 2 minutes prior. The twist? All the participants were very intoxicated. Despite this, most could pay attention to the task and correctly name the toy they had seen. Yet, when Donald asked them to recall the object a mere 30 minutes later, half the participants drew a blank, having blacked out the earlier moment entirely. This study illustrates the strange or somewhat selective effect alcohol has on the brain. Many intoxicated people can perform complex tasks like holding a detailed conversation or navigating a walk home. Yet, for those experiencing what is known as a blackout, the memory of these events is quickly forgotten. So how does the alcohol cause these memory lapses? First, let's identify the culprit. While a single drink often contains hundreds of different chemical compounds, ethanol is responsible for alcoholic effects on the brain. Ethanol is lightweight and lipophilic, meaning its structure easily dissolves into fats, like those in the membrane of the outer blood-brain barrier. Like those in the membrane of the outer brain barrier. Once inside the brain, ethanol's unique structure allows it to bind to, interact. Once inside the brain, ethanol's unique structure allows it to bind to, interact, and affect many different neurons and receptors, impairing pathways that allow you to make careful decisions, control your impulses, even manage your motor skills, and networks that control memory seem to be especially sensitive to alcoholic effects. Typically, information about your surroundings is taken in by your sensory organs and sent to the brain. Neurons transfer this information to one another via chemical messengers called neurotransmitters, which are released by one neuron and received by receptors at another. When neurotransmitters bind to receptors, it unlocks an internal channel, allowing small iron to flow into cells. If enough iron enters the cell, the neuron fires, sending the signal forward. Through this process, different regions of the brain can communicate with one another in a millisecond, creating a moment-to-moment understanding of the world. But ethanol interacts with receptors, making it harder for neurons to communicate. While compromised, the brain is still able to transfer information, which is why many intoxicated people seem somewhat capable of performing basic tasks. In other words, brain function is highly impaired but not completely broken. When memory storage is a different story. The transfer of moment-to-moment understanding to something we can remember is thought to depend on the process called long-term potentiation. Potentiation, or ATP. ATP happens throughout the brain, but it's especially important in learning and memory regions like the neural cortex and hippocampus. During ATP, the firing of neurons triggers physical changes in its structure. For example, more receptors may be moved to the surface, making the neuron more sensitive to future signaling from its neighbors. These physical changes increases the likelihood that the cell will fire again at the connection, strengthening the wiring between neurons. And through these strong connections, it's thought that a stable memory is formed. Yet studies suggest that ethanol has a unique ability to disrupt ATP, blocking the physical changes needed for memory information. So while moment-to-moment information is encoded and understood, the storage of that information is blunted, resulting in the blackout. Of course, not all levels of drinking result in blackout. They happen when the concentration of alcohol They happen when concentration of alcohol in the blood, or BAC, exceeds a certain level, approximately 0.16. But there's no magic number. At slightly lower BAC, brownouts or spotty memory of the events can occur, as some neurons continue to function properly while others fail, and drinking too much can cause a person to pass out altogether. Other factors like dehydration level, genetic differences, and medications, and even how much you've eaten can affect the likelihood of blackout. And teenagers appear to be especially vulnerable due to substantial changes in the brain development during this year. Alcohol short-term effects usually don't last longer than the entire alcohol short-term effects usually don't last longer than the time it takes than the time it takes and the time it takes for the body to metabolize it, or about a day, but repeatedly overdrinking can damage neurons and permanently impair memory. It can also harm other organs, like the liver, which works overtime breaking down alcohol. After all, it's experiencing blackout and witnessing others in the After all, experiencing a blackout or witnessing others in this compromising state can be a lot for your mind, can be a lot of your mind and the body to process.